The heavy metal gates of Westfield Correctional Facility creaked open on a gray November morning. Marcus Devereaux stood motionless, his weathered face registering neither joy nor relief, only a cold, calculated intensity that burned behind his eyes. Freedom after 5,475 days felt foreign, almost threatening. The world had moved on without him, but Marcus had not moved on from what put him there. What transforms an honest, hard-working man into a methodical killer? For Marcus Devereaux, it wasn't a sudden break or a moment of passion. It was 15 years of injustice, slowly corrupting his soul, one prison night at a time. Blood pooled across marble flooring in an elegant hotel suite. A figure stood silhouetted against city lights, breathing heavily, the deed finally done. Not in rage, but in execution of a plan years in the making. This wasn't just murder, it was Marcus's twisted version of justice. His story begins like many others: a promising career, a beautiful relationship, dreams of the future. But when Veronica Dalton entered his life, she brought a devastating betrayal that would cost Marcus everything. His freedom, his dignity, his humanity. "They took 15 years from me for something I didn't do," Marcus whispered to himself as he took his first steps away from prison. "Now I'll take everything from them." The justice system had failed him. The woman he loved had destroyed him. And now, released back into society without rehabilitation or support, Marcus Devereaux had transformed from victim to predator. Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they were willing to sacrifice your entire life for their gain? How far would you go for justice when every institution meant to protect you has turned its back? Let me know in the comments below. This isn't just another crime story. This is an intimate journey into the mind of a man who lost everything to a lie, and the calculating path he took from wrongful conviction to double murder. We'll trace the psychological evolution of Marcus Devereaux, how prison didn't rehabilitate him but instead crafted him into the very criminal he was accused of being. The truth about Marcus's case would eventually surface, but by then, 2 people would be dead, and the question remains: when betrayal and injustice push someone beyond their breaking point, who is truly responsible for what follows? Before prison walls defined his existence, Marcus Devereaux was known throughout Oak Ridge as the brilliant mind behind several patented software systems that revolutionized local manufacturing. At 33, his career at Midwest Technical Solutions had already earned him respect, stability, and the quiet admiration of colleagues who valued his methodical approach to complex problems. Marcus could see patterns where others saw chaos, former coworker David Thornton recalled. He built systems that anticipated problems before they happened, ironically, except in his personal life. Weekdays found Marcus absorbed in code and algorithms, weekends in solitary hikes through Oak Ridge Nature Preserve. His life followed a predictable rhythm until that rainy April evening when he ducked into Café Meridian to escape a sudden downpour. Veronica Dalton sat alone at the corner table, her crimson dress a stark contrast to the cafe's muted tones. Their eyes met across the room, and for a man who calculated everything, the immediate chemistry defied logic. "I never believed in that thunderbolt moment," Marcus later told a friend, "until it happened to me." Their first conversation lasted 5 hours. Marcus, usually reserved, found himself sharing dreams he'd never voiced aloud. Veronica listened with those piercing green eyes that seemed to understand him completely. "We've all fallen for someone who seemed perfect. The kind of love that blinds you to red flags hiding in plain sight. The dangerous comfort of feeling truly seen for the first time." Within weeks, Marcus and Veronica became inseparable. She attended company functions on his arm, charming executives with her quick wit and strategic insights. Their romance progressed with intoxicating intensity, weekend getaways, passionate nights, and whispered promises of forever. What Marcus interpreted as ambition, others recognized as calculation. Veronica carefully cataloged connections at every social gathering, her questions about corporate structures and leadership more targeted than casual. Her interest in Marcus's high-security clearance seemed affectionate concern rather than deliberate extraction. "I noticed how her eyes tracked the most influential person in any room," said Eleanor Wright, Marcus's project manager. "She collected people like assets, but Marcus was too entranced to see it. When Veronica suggested Marcus introduce her to Ronald Pierce, the entrepreneur whose investment group was negotiating with Midwest Technical, he never questioned her interest. When she began working late with Ronald on consulting projects, Marcus trusted her explanations completely. Marcus's vulnerability lay in his fundamental belief in order and logic. Systems followed rules, people should too. The possibility that Veronica could fabricate an entire relationship, could look into his eyes and speak love while plotting his destruction, simply didn't compute within his worldview. By the time warning signs multiplied, unexplained absences, mysterious phone calls, subtle changes in her story, Marcus had already entrusted Veronica with everything. His passwords, his home, his future plans, his heart. The foundations for catastrophe were perfectly laid. The truth erupted in Marcus's life on an ordinary Tuesday. Heading to lunch, he spotted Veronica and Ronald Pierce in the parking garage of Meridian Tower, not in professional conversation, but locked in an intimate embrace. The portfolio she carried wasn't filled with consulting documents but with copies of Marcus's secure files. "I followed them," Marcus later testified. "Not out of jealousy, but confusion. What I discovered wasn't just an affair, it was a conspiracy." 4 months, Veronica had been extracting proprietary information from Marcus's systems, feeding valuable intellectual property to Ronald's investment group. Their plan was sophisticated: acquire Midwest Technical Solutions at a fraction of its value once its innovations were already compromised. Marcus confronted Veronica that evening with evidence of her duplicity. Their argument echoed through the apartment complex. Neighbors reported hearing objects breaking, followed by an eerie silence. Marcus left alone, devastated but determined to expose their scheme. 3 days later, Ronald Pierce was found dead in his office, brutally beaten, then shot at close range. Security footage showed a figure matching Marcus's build entering the building, though the face remained obscured. The murder weapon appeared to be missing from Marcus's registered collection. Detective Lauren Mitchell arrived at Marcus's apartment with a warrant. The evidence against him accumulated with disturbing precision, she admitted years later. Too precisely in retrospect. Inside his home, Ronald's blood on a jacket sleeve. On his computer, searches about untraceable murder methods. His alibi, non-existent, as he'd been driving aimlessly, processing betrayal. The courtroom became a theater of calculated deception. Veronica Dalton took the stand in a modest navy dress, her makeup subtle, voice trembling with practiced vulnerability. "I was afraid for my life," she testified, dabbing at tears. "Marcus became obsessed, controlling. When he discovered I was helping Ronald with legitimate business concerns, he threatened us both." Her performance captivated the jury, 12 citizens who never questioned why evidence appeared so conveniently, why forensics matched so perfectly, why Marcus's previously spotless character would suddenly fracture. Public defender James Whitley, overworked with 37 active cases, failed to investigate Veronica's background or financial connections. The prosecutor barred expert testimony questioning the forensic timeline. The judge denied requests to examine Ronald's business dealings that might have revealed other motives. Each failure compounded: rushed DNA analysis, overlooked witness statements contradicting Veronica's timeline, ignored inconsistencies in security footage. The system didn't malfunction. It operated exactly as designed, prioritizing swift conviction over methodical truth-seeking. The jury deliberated just 4 hours before finding Marcus Devereaux guilty of first-degree murder. 15 years, the judge pronounced, sealing Marcus's fate with a swift gavel strike. As officers led him away, Marcus locked eyes with Veronica one final time. Her tears had dried. In their place, a cold smile of victory. This is why I cover these stories. Because justice systems fail people every day through rushed processes, overworked defenders, and evidence that no one has time to question. If you believe we need reform that prioritizes truth over convenience, hit the like button and share this video. These aren't just stories, they're warnings. Westfield Correctional Facility housed 1,843 men in spaces built for 1,200. Marcus's first cell measured 8 by 10 feet, shared with a volatile cellmate who marked territory through intimidation. The constant noise, metal doors slamming, guards shouting commands, men arguing, pleading, sometimes screaming, never ceased, not even at 3 a.m. "The first thing prison takes is your dignity," Marcus wrote in a journal entry. "Wake up when told. Shower with no privacy. Eat food barely fit for consumption. Ask permission to use the bathroom. Be strip-searched returning from visits. Eventually, you forget you were ever more than an ID number." Violence punctuated monotony. Marcus witnessed 3 stabbings his first year. By year 2, he'd endured 4 beatings. Refusing to join gangs carried consequences. The worst damage wasn't to his body but his mind, as each day stripped away another layer of the man he once was. Month 6, I still believed in appeals, he told a prison counselor. Year 3, I stopped imagining life outside. Year 7, I stopped dreaming entirely. The methodical engineer who once found elegant solutions to complex problems transformed into a man who meticulously documented injustices, cataloging each piece of his destruction. His mind, once focused on creation, now fixated on a single equation: who deserved blame for his ruined life? Mandatory therapy sessions offered no relief. Overworked prison psychologists rotated every few months, each one starting from zero with standardized questions. "Tell me about your childhood," they would begin, reading from forms. "I'm here because a woman lied and the justice system believed her," Marcus would answer. "Your anger isn't productive," they would respond, checking boxes on assessment forms. "Let's focus on acceptance." One therapist prescribed medication that left Marcus foggy. Another suggested his obsession with innocence was the primary obstacle to rehabilitation. None addressed the fundamental trauma of wrongful imprisonment or offered genuine pathways to healing. Real education came from fellow inmates, particularly older men serving decades-long sentences. "Justice is a luxury," explained Raymond, serving 30 years for armed robbery. "The system doesn't give it freely. Sometimes you have to take it." During workshop hours, while crafting furniture sold to fund the prison, Marcus absorbed lessons in patience and planning from men who understood vengeance as the only currency remaining to them. "Don't act on emotion," counseled Victor, a former accountant convicted of murdering his business partner. "Calculate every variable. The perfect revenge requires perfect planning." In the prison library, Marcus devoured books on psychology, studying the very manipulation tactics Veronica had used against him. At night, he methodically constructed mental models of what his betrayers' lives had become, feeding his determination with detailed fantasies of confrontation. Imagine losing 15 years of your life, birthdays, holidays, career milestones, while the person who put you there thrives. Imagine watching your parents age through monthly visits, then attending their funerals in shackles. Imagine former colleagues becoming industry leaders while your innovations collect dust. How would your mind process that theft of time? By year 15, the transformation was complete. The thoughtful systems engineer had been rebuilt into something else entirely. A human weapon, precisely calibrated for a single purpose. When the parole board finally approved his release, they believed they were freeing a rehabilitated man. They were actually releasing a precision instrument of retribution. Freedom assaulted Marcus's senses. The colors too vivid, sounds too sharp, spaces too vast after years confined to concrete and steel. Standing in the convenience store his first night out, he froze, paralyzed by 47 different brands of toothpaste, the endless choices a mockery after 15 years of having none. "The gentleman just stood there for 20 minutes, the clerk recalled. Not moving, barely breathing, staring at ordinary products like they were from another planet. His state-issued ID marked him as an ex-convict. 26 job applications, 26 rejections. Landlords required background checks and references. Former colleagues avoided his calls. The halfway house offered temporary shelter but no true refuge, just another institutional bed with different rules. We give them $200 and expect them to rebuild lives," explained reintegration counselor Dana Wilson. "No job training, inadequate mental health services, minimal housing assistance. We're essentially abandoning people who've already been damaged by the system." Nights brought no peace. Marcus woke screaming, drenched in sweat, still trapped in nightmares where guards counted him endlessly or Veronica testified against him in an infinite loop. During daylight hours, sudden noises triggered prison reflexes, back against walls, hands raised defensively, eyes constantly scanning for threats. The public library provided internet access, and Marcus methodically traced Veronica's ascent during his imprisonment. What he discovered fueled his darkening purpose. Veronica Dalton was now Veronica Pierce Langley, Chief Innovation Officer at Pinnacle Technologies, built on patents suspiciously similar to those Marcus had developed before his conviction. Her meteoric rise had begun immediately after his sentencing. Ronald's murder, staged to appear as a crime of jealous rage, had been merely the first step. Further digging revealed Ronald hadn't died that night. The murdered man was Ronald's body double, a hired actor who resembled him closely enough to fool investigators. The real Ronald had disappeared, resurfacing 2 years later in Europe under a new identity, his transformation funded by the technologies stolen from Marcus. Now remarried, Ronald had returned to America as Richard Langley, Veronica's new husband and business partner. The perfect crime, Marcus whispered, copying addresses and schedules. Using my conviction to fake a death and steal my work. The halfway house provided no therapist who might have recognized the dangerous precision with which Marcus was planning. No monitoring system noticed his increasingly focused research. No support network existed to channel his justified anger toward legal remedies. Instead, alone with his trauma and armed with damning discoveries, Marcus constructed his response with the same meticulous attention he once gave to engineering problems. Each movement plotted, each contingency considered, each target evaluated. When we send people through trauma and abandon them without healing, should we be surprised by what emerges? The system that wrongfully imprisoned Marcus also failed to help him rebuild. Without intervention, revenge becomes the only justice some can imagine. For 37 days, Marcus observed Richard Langley, formerly Ronald Pierce, from careful distances. He documented the man's routines: 6 a.m. workouts at an exclusive fitness center, 7:45 a.m. coffee at Westside Brews, 8:30 a.m. arrival at Pinnacle Technologies. Each movement tracked in a small notebook with engineer's precision. Marcus noted the pattern break on Thursdays. Richard would leave the office early, driving his midnight blue Tesla to an industrial complex outside city limits. There, he'd meet with investors in a renovated warehouse, away from corporate eyes and recording devices. On the 5th Thursday, Marcus waited in the shadowed corner of the parking lot. The meeting ran late. Attendees departed in luxury vehicles until only Richard remained, locking up. The lot stood empty except for 2 men and 15 years of stolen time between them. "Hello, Ronald," Marcus said, stepping from darkness. Richard froze, recognition dawning slowly. "Marcus? Impossible, sir. In prison? For killing you?" Marcus approached steadily. "Interesting how alive you look for a murder victim." Richard's composure fractured. "Listen, it wasn't personal. Business opportunity presented itself. 15 years of my life wasn't personal?" Marcus's voice remained unervingly calm. "My parents dying while I sat in a cell wasn't personal?" Richard reached for his phone. "We can make this right. Money, a position at Pinnacle?" The movement happened with prison yard efficiency. Marcus closed the distance in 3 steps, disarming Richard with a precise strike to the wrist. What followed wasn't chaotic rage but methodical violence, each blow delivered with calculated purpose. Richard gasped his final words through bloodied lips. "Veronica, she planned everything. I just followed." The confession ended abruptly. Marcus stood over the body, unmoved by the finality of what he'd done. He collected Richard's phone, wallet, and security badge before disappearing into the night. The Pinnacle Technologies charity gala provided perfect cover for his final confrontation. Using Richard's credentials, Marcus accessed the service entrance, blending with catering staff in borrowed uniforms. He navigated the hotel's back corridors until he located the executive preparation suite. Veronica Pierce Langley stood alone before a mirror, adjusting diamond earrings that caught the light like tears. The door clicked shut behind Marcus. "Security will be here any minute," she said without turning, assuming a staff member had entered. "They're busy with a disturbance I arranged in the main ballroom," Marcus replied. She froze, recognition in her eyes before she even faced him. "Marcus." 15 years, Veronica. I had a lot of time to think about this moment. Her shock transformed quickly to calculation. "Whatever Richard told you." "Richard is dead," Marcus stated flatly. "Though I believe Ronald was his preference." Fear flashed across her face, then something colder. "What do you want? Money? Recognition for your work?" "I want to understand why. Was anything between us real?" A strange smile curved her lips. "You were convenient, Marcus. Brilliant but naive. The perfect combination. You let me serve 15 years for a murder that never happened." "The world runs on opportunity and sacrifice," she replied, backing toward her purse. "Your sacrifice, my opportunity. Nothing personal." Marcus moved with the same efficiency he'd employed with Richard. The confrontation ended more quickly than he'd imagined during countless prison nights. Her final words, a desperate offer to share wealth built on his stolen work, echoed in the empty suite as he departed. In that moment, standing before the woman who stole 15 years of his life, who showed no remorse, who still saw him as merely a stepping stone to her success, what would you have done? Was Marcus justified in seeking his own justice when the system failed him so completely? Or did his revenge transform him into the very criminal they claimed he was? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Headlines across the country blazed with stark accusations. Tech executive double murder rocks business world, and released prisoners' revenge SP. Cable news networks dissected every angle, transforming Marcus Devereaux from an unknown ex-convict to the center of a national debate overnight. The discovery of 2 bodies within 24 hours, a successful businessman and his equally prominent wife, created a media frenzy. Initial reports painted Marcus as a calculating monster, emphasizing his prison record while glossing over the circumstances of his conviction. The narrative shifted dramatically once investigators examined Veronica's digital footprint, noted District Attorney Elena Cortez. Evidence emerged suggesting the original murder conviction was based on fabricated evidence. Former Midwest technical colleagues came forward with accounts of Veronica's calculated rise. She targeted Marcus specifically, revealed IT Director Michael Chin. She asked detailed questions about his access levels before they even started dating. "We thought she was just interested in his work." 3 former assistants described Veronica's methodical elimination of competitors at Pinnacle Technologies. Documents recovered from her private server revealed a pattern of corporate espionage, blackmail, and strategic relationships, all stepping stones toward power. Most damning was the discovery of offshore accounts linking Veronica and Ronald/Richard to payments made to witnesses in Marcus's original trial. Digital forensics uncovered elaborately falsified evidence that had secured his conviction. The investigation connected Marcus to both crime scenes through security footage and DNA evidence. He made no attempts to hide his actions, surrendering peacefully when authorities located him 3 days after the murders. Legal experts clashed over interpretations of Marcus's culpability. "Wrongful imprisonment creates profound psychological trauma," explained forensic psychiatrist Dr. Amara Wilson. 15 years of institutional confinement fundamentally alters neural pathways, impairing decision-making and moral reasoning. Defense attorneys pointed to clear failures in the reintegration system. Mr. Devereaux received exactly 8 hours of pre-release counseling and a bus ticket, noted prisoner rights advocate Jordan Williams. No therapy for his trauma, no assistance securing employment, no monitoring for psychological deterioration. The community fractured along predictable lines. Law enforcement organizations emphasized that personal vengeance could never replace legal justice. Wrongful conviction advocacy groups pointed to Marcus as the inevitable product of systemic failure. "When we imprison innocent people, then release them without healing or restitution, we create ticking time bombs," argued Criminal Justice Reform Coalition Director Eliza Montgomery. Marcus Devereaux isn't an anomaly, he's a warning. Prison reform legislation bearing Marcus's name was introduced in 3 states, calling for enhanced reintegration services, mandatory psychological support for exonerees, and financial compensation for years lost to wrongful conviction. Meanwhile, technology publications uncovered the full extent of intellectual property theft. Patents Marcus had developed before his imprisonment had generated billions under Pinnacle Technologies' umbrella, wealth built entirely on his stolen innovations and freedom. The Marcus Devereaux case exposes failures at every level, concluded prominent legal analyst Devin Harris. From police investigation to courtroom procedures to prisoner reintegration. The question isn't why this happened, but why it doesn't happen more often. Marcus Devereaux's second trial proceeded with the efficiency his first lacked. With overwhelming evidence and his own admission of guilt, the jury convicted him of double homicide. The judge, acknowledging the extraordinary circumstances, sentenced him to 2 consecutive life terms. The cruel symmetry lost on no one. The ultimate tragedy, noted Marcus's new attorney, is that justice eventually prevailed in proving his original innocence only after he'd committed the very crime he was wrongfully convicted of 15 years ago. The most haunting evidence presented wasn't the meticulous murder plans or damning DNA, but Marcus's prison journals. Year by year, they documented his psychological evolution, from a man desperately proclaiming innocence to one methodically plotting revenge. The transformation wasn't sudden but incremental, hope fading into resignation, resignation hardening into resolve, resolve crystallizing into deadly purpose. What created Marcus Devereaux, killer? Not a single catastrophic moment but a cascade of institutional failures. A justice system prioritizing quick convictions over thorough investigation. Prison environments designed to punish rather than rehabilitate. Reintegration programs offering minimal support for traumatized individuals. Mental health services inaccessible to those who need them most. When betrayal intersects with systemic neglect, the human mind bends toward retribution. Marcus's story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about responsibility. Was Marcus solely accountable for his actions? Or did responsibility extend to Veronica's calculated betrayal, to overworked public defenders, to prison administrators, to reintegration counselors who recognized danger signs but lacked resources to intervene? His case offers stark lessons about the fragility of trust and the seductive power of vengeance. Trust, once shattered, transforms into a weapon, particularly when betrayal comes from someone intimately connected to us. Vengeance promises resolution but delivers only hollow victory, creating new victims while failing to heal original wounds. Most disturbing is what Marcus's journey reveals about our capacity for transformation. The brilliant engineer who once created systems to improve lives became equally brilliant at destroying them. The skills that made him exceptional, patience, analytical thinking, attention to detail, became the perfect tools for calculating revenge. Every person exists in a delicate balance between creation and destruction. Push someone far enough, through betrayal, injustice, and abandonment, and that balance tips irrevocably. This story reminds us how quickly justice can become vengeance when systems fail those they're meant to protect. The line between victim and perpetrator isn't as clear as we might wish. It's a boundary crossed in small steps, each seeming justified at the moment. If you want more examinations of the psychology behind true crime and the systems that shape human behavior, subscribe to the Crime Insider.